Hello, good afternoon. It's great to see you here, ready to talk about co-productions. I am very excited to meet you. I am Denitsa Jordanova. I'm head of the UK Global Screen Fund and BFI's international funds. I'm a youngish woman with dark hair, blue eyes. I am wearing a dark jumpsuit. I'm very excited to be joined today, not by one, but actually two incredible co-productions. Disclaimer, they are funded by the UK Global Screen Fund. They're both minority co-productions, both official co-productions, but very different projects. I will introduce our panelists and their projects quickly, but I wanted, before I begin, to get a sense of the audience and the varying levels of experience you might have with co-production. So can I have a show of hands of how many people have never co-produced? Okay, well, quite a lot, okay. Can I also have a show of hands of people who may have co-produced, but they have never done an official co-production? Okay, okay. Don't worry, you are in safe hands. So in this panel, we'll be actually delving into the mechanics of co-production. And we will be explaining all the differences. We will be talking about how you put finance plans together. And we'll be doing that in the best way possible, which is a case study format. So I am very excited to have the great teams behind two, as I said, quite different co-productions, but both actually similar in some ways, as we discovered in the panel pre-chat. So we have, and I will start with my right, your left, we have the team behind Bring Them Down, which is a co-production between Ireland, Tailored Films, Belgium, Fracas Productions, and the UK, Wild Swim Films. This project has had a really interesting journey, one that brings us back to Cannes, as it was a part of the last year Grade 8 selection. It had a world premiere at Toronto Film Festival. It was an official competition in London Film Festival, and it's won a number of awards and accolades, including BIFA Best Directorial Debut Award for Chris Andrews, Best Film and Fantastic Fest, the Fipresci Prize at the Mannheim Heidelberg Festival, Best Screenplay at the Roman Film Festival. I might have to stop there because we don't have enough time, but it's done really well, and we have a little clip for you later. And it's a really exciting film that is a psychological thriller. I will let the team tell you more, but it has a lot of exciting sheep elements into it in the world of shepherds and masculinity. With us, we're very lucky to have the Irish co-producers Ruth, Treacy, and Julianne Forde. Julianne and Ruth. They are producers and co-founders of Tailored Films based in Dublin, creating feature films and TV drama series with a strong focus on ambitious international co-productions. They have produced together more than 7 international feature films and 10 TV series. Their recent projects include The Apprentice, Oscar, BAFTA, and Golden Globe nominee. Applause. And also, Julianne is an experienced DOP and VFX producer, and Ruth is a director and graduate of AVA Screen Leaders, producer on The Move, member of EFA and the European Producers Club. You're really lucky to have this really great crowd, actually. We also have, obviously, the UK producer, which is Ivana MacKinnon, on the right. She has founded Wild Swim in 2019 and has produced more than 4 films since then, so including How to Have Sex, which won Uncertain Regard Prize in Cannes in 2023. Should I keep going with all the awards? You're looking at me slightly embarrassed. But anyway, she has obviously with this film won Uncertain Regard Prize in Cannes very recently, nominated for 4 BAFTAs. Prior to Wild Swim, she produced Michael Pearce's Beast, which also won a lot of awards. And before working for Cloud Pictures and Salvador Films, she worked across films such as Slumdog Millionaire and The Descent. So this is the team behind Bring Them Down. We are very lucky to have a film which is currently in production, which is our second case study, which is a co-production between New Zealand, Tahi Films, and the UK. In this film, we have the true story of rugby legend John Lomu, so it's a biopic. And we are lucky to have the UK producer, Victoria Barrell, co-founder of Sylver Entertainment. Sylver specializes in global theatrical, long-form, multi-episodic content, basically everything, so from TV. Her films include McEnroe, The Greatest Game, Schmeichel, and the recent production of Hill, which will be released in July. And we are in post-production, obviously, on Lomu, which we're eagerly awaiting. we are also very lucky to have Emma Slade, who is Managing Director and Talent Development Production at Tahi Production in New Zealand, who has produced and line produced a number of projects over the past 20 years, so I will definitely not have time for all of them. But they include the first Chinese-New Zealand co-production, Into the Rainbow, Brazilian-New Zealand feature Little Secret, which was nominated as Brazil's Oscar entry for Best Foreign Film in 2017, Bookworm, which received Fantastic Fest Audience Award, and Uproar, which had its world premiere at Toronto Film Festival. So you are literally in great company with very experienced co-producers. So, after I talked so much introducing all of them, I wanted to start us off with a question, which I will make doubly difficult for all of our panelists, because I'm going to ask them to hold about 3 different things in their head. I wanted to ask how each of you got involved with the project, what the story is about. But before we even get there, you have to start with a visual description of yourselves. So perhaps I will start with the Bring Them Down team, and then we will walk down towards me.
Are you sure?
Okay, I am a middle-aged woman with white skin, green eyes, dark hair, and I'm very sweaty. Oh, do I answer the question as well, or did we just do the visual description?
Let's start with the visual description.
Okay, cool.
Then I'll remind you of the questions, so it feels more natural.
I am also middle-aged, white producer with blonde hair and light-coloured eyes in a blue dress.
Yeah, producer in my 40s, long red hair, combat trousers.
Thank you. That was very, very appropriate and very detailed visual description. So now I'll remind you of the question, which is how each of you got involved in the project. So you can use this to tell us a little bit more what the project is about and how you got on board.
So I came on board the project. It was already a second draft when I came on board, and there's a fourth the second UK producer called Jacob Swanheim, who had been developing the script with our writer-director Chris Andrews, and they'd made a short film together called Stalker, which was really fantastic, incredibly ambitious, very sort of similar in tone. So I came on board initially sort of talking about execing it, and then just sort of fell in love with it and started getting much more involved. We did, I suppose, a couple of years of script development from that point. And then we came to kind of put the film together and start raising finance, and we couldn't get enough out of the UK. So we then thought, well, what about Ireland, our very close neighbour? And I travelled over to Dublin and met with Ruth initially and sent the script over. And we started having a conversation about how it might work in Ireland and what sources of finance there were. And what was really beautiful about that was then Chris and Jacob went over to do a recce, and the script was originally written for the Peak District, which is close to where Chris grew up and is a very dramatic landscape and farming communities. And actually, they went around Ireland, and he came back and he said it's so similar, but also there's all this additional stuff in Ireland that's really interesting. The landscapes are kind of interesting in a different way, and there's the Irish language, which is something that he felt like he really wanted to engage with as a sort of extra layer in the story. So it became something that, was a creative boon to the project, as well as something which enabled us to kind of pull together a different way of financing it.
Yeah, so as Ivana said, she sent the script to us, and our development exec kind of summarised it to me and mentioned that there was a sheep massacre in it, which, to be honest, at first I was like, I think no. But I looked up who was behind it, and obviously was a big fan of Beast and Ivana's previous work, and looked at Chris's shorts and thought they were fantastic too. So we read the script, and it was so compelling, I couldn't put it down, and so kind of devastating that I knew, even though it was probably going to be a difficult proposition to raise finance for, that we really wanted to be involved with it. So as Ivana said, we met up, and it felt like there was a real creative synergy in the way we approach projects as well as producers, so that was exciting. And when Chris and Jacob came around to do a recce or to location scout, it felt like it would be a good fit. And we also started to discuss the possibility of structuring it where Ireland might become the majority financier. And we started working out different ways that could possibly work. And because Chris was so open to transposing the story to be fully Irish and authentic in that setting. That was, that made it much more possible. So we brought on board a really amazing Irish actor dialect coach called Padder Cox, who started to work with Chris on changing the dialogue to be more Irish in the setting, and also bringing in the Irish language, which we felt was important for the two characters of Michael and his dad, because they kind of are a little bit at odds and removed from the community around them, but they share this language, which is almost like a special bond between them, which is different and makes them different from some of the others. So yeah, it was. It felt very creatively collaborative, and we then started to look at what the financing options in Ireland were. I don't know whether we want to go into that now, though.
I could come back to the financing options, I think, in a second. But I think we've set the stage actually quite nicely. Now we've prepared you. We said psychological thriller. We said sheep massacre. So I think it's a good time to play the trailer, because what we didn't say is Barry Keoghan, Christopher Abbott, and Colm Meaney, but they're all in there. So shall we play the trailer from Bring Them Down for a second?
If you had a chance to leave here, would you? You could go anywhere. Go live somewhere else.
Wake up. What's going on?
We lost the rams.
Jack! Here, what do you know about these rams?
Hey! What's this?
Jack,
These are the two animals you told me were dead.
You want them? Come get them.
what happened?
Rustlers. Attacked my flock. We'll offer him thousands for one animal, but will he sell?
Don't. I'm gonna go live with Michael.
What you gonna do? Kill me like you killed your mommy?
Michael, stop! Always obsessed with fire.
Told you to kill them. He shouldn't have.
How can you do it, Michael?
Sure, you know what they say. We're just livestock. There's dead stock.
We will come back at the end to tell you where you can watch this, and I promise you it's a very good watch. So I'll leave this to sit with you for a little bit, and we're going to switch tonally to a very different film, set again in a very masculine environment, and that of professional rugby playing. And I would suggest we get our visual descriptions out of the way so we can then go to the questions. So let's start with Victoria and Emma, if you can give us a quick visual description.
So, hi there, Victoria Barrell of Sylver Entertainment. I am a middle-aged woman who is fair-haired, brown-eyed, and I'm wearing a green top.
And tēnā koutou katoa, welcome. My name is Emma Slade. I am from New Zealand, from a company called Tahi Productions and Firefly Films. And I am a tall woman with brown hair, blue eyes, white, and a brown and black dress and sneakers.
Very well done, very well done. Thank you both. Can you tell us now the same question, basically, which is how did this project originate? And maybe tell us a little bit more about how you approached the story as well, because it is a biopic. And you have to decide how to collate so much information on a person's life in 90 minutes. And you're still obviously working on the film, so we can't show a clip. But how did each of you get attached? What drew you to the idea, and what's the project really about?
So, what drew us to the idea? Sylver Entertainment does a lot of sports, music, and icon documentaries, and I'm a massive rugby fan. I'm also, for full disclosure, married to a Kiwi, so obviously Jonah Lomu has been in my kind of orbit for a very long time. And I was always very curious that a theatrical documentary hadn't yet happened on Jonah. He was absolutely revolutionary for the sport. He changed the game permanently as an individual player. And so we really just felt quite strongly that it was high time that we tried to get a documentary off the ground to celebrate him and his career. Now, obviously, this documentary is fundamentally New Zealand in terms of him as a Tongan Pacifica player who grew up in New Zealand. And so it became apparent very early on that it would be the right and smart thing to be entering into a co-production and working directly with New Zealand. This film was always going to have to be predominantly shot in New Zealand. And so, as Sylver, we had never done a formal co-production before, so this was our first foray into that world. And we were incredibly lucky because we got introduced to both Emma and Victoria Dabbs at Tahi Productions, and we're able to work with really experienced producers who've done a number of international co-productions and have paired up very successfully and are now halfway through our post-production journey on Lomu.
And as Victoria said, she approached us to come on board, and we were incredibly excited. I was at university when Jonah Lomu was really coming to the world stage, so not being a dissimilar age from him, and was very excited about this proposition. And the interesting thing is that we were wondering if this was a story that everybody knew about and something that has become very obvious in our journey of making it. This is definitely a story that people don't know, and there is so much to it, and there is a lot of complexities, and what an extraordinary man he was on and off the field.
Thank you for that. I want to spend a little bit of time talking about finance plans, but before I get to that, you've just mentioned that this was your first co-production experience, Victoria. So I was wondering, actually, Ivana, for you, was it also a first co-production?
It was my first official co-production. So How to Have Sex was an unofficial co-production with Greece. But this was my first official co-production.
So for both of you, as embarking on a, let's say, first official or first co-production in general, in hindsight, is there any advice you might be able to give to the producers in the audience? How do you make this work? Is it an experienced international partner? Is it training programs? Like, how do you get prepared to embark on something that does require you as a co-production to have an understanding of the treaty system, the frameworks, the individual incentives? What would be your advice? How do you get prepared?
For us, I think, actually you guys at the Global Screen Fund were genuinely amazing. I think it's really important when you're embarking on new journeys like this to know that it's okay to ask all the questions and that people have time to kind of shed some light on some of the complexities of pulling these, kind of finance plans together when you're working internationally. I think we'd attached Dogworth fairly early on. Dogworth are a really well-known independent documentary house, sales house. And we were very much encouraged to explore this because it was a challenge getting Lomu financed. Rugby is not a global sport. It's an international sport, but it's not global. So it has mass appeal in key territories, but not necessarily some of the others. So we were having to box quite clever to get this one financed. And yeah, so the international co-production journey really was kind of like, it was quite clear that we had to do that early on and get organised to go through that. So, yeah.
Right. Ivana, for you, what was it like?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a real journey. Like, I've learned an enormous amount. And it's been relatively complicated because at one point, we were going to co-produce with France. And then we ended up co-producing with Belgium. So there were sort of different iterations of the film and a lot to sort of figure out. But yeah, I think partners who know what they're doing, really important, and who can kind of clearly express to you what, what their experience is and also how it works in their territory and what you need. Because they're all films, like I think it's the things coming up that you don't know are coming up that kill you, especially when you start doing something that you've never done before. And so it's always the hardest question to answer is how do you prepare for things that you don't know are going to come? And there were a couple of things on this, on the British side actually, which you could never have helped us with, that sort of came up and we were like, holy shit, which we fixed. But kind of, it is a sort of learning curve. So I think it's always just the case that you try and fill in the bits that you don't like. It's just the model for all producing. Fill in the bits that you don't know with someone who does. Don't pretend you know it. So yeah, just like working with other people who are really experienced. And then just kind of continuing to talk about everything the whole way through because you need to keep a lot kind of in line in terms of spend and stuff.
Right, so transparency and communications coming across very strongly. Probably a good time to talk about from the point of view of a more experienced co-producer. And I was wondering, Julianne, if I can ask you this question: how did the finance plan come together? Because there's lots of different pieces that, especially in the structure of official co-productions, have to align. How was that journey for bring them down? What came first? How did you develop that finance plan to get it to the stage that you're ready to enter production?
Yeah, well, yeah, it was a journey, and I suppose a lot of people at the start kind of put up their hands and said they hadn't done an official co-production. So just maybe to row back a tiny bit and explain on a basic level, an official co-production is where you partner together to raise money in each of your territories and bring creative elements to spend that money on, and basically build the finance together in that way. So it's not relying on one studio to commission it. It's each partner going to their own potential sources of finance. Some of them could be commercial, some of them could be soft funding, and building the finance that way. And so Ivana already had some development funding in place for the project. I think you had BFI lockbox that you were able to access. And there was another piece of development finance, was there?
Yeah, Creative England at the beginning.
Creative England had come on board at the beginning, and you know, once we started developing the script, we're very lucky in Ireland that we have a few different national funds that we can apply to. So Screen Ireland was one of them. We also have Commission the Man, which is more a regional, a fund that's separate to Screen Ireland. They commission both television and feature films. So we were lucky enough to be able to secure both of those pieces of financing. And then combine that with the Irish tax credit in Ireland. And I think at that point, we identified together, I suppose, once we realised it wasn't going to work with France, that we needed a third co-production partner. And we had wanted to work with Fracas Productions, Jean-Yves Rubin, for a while. So we kind of brought the project to him, and he really liked it. Ivana had pitched it to Mubi, who were also came on board officially at that point. And yeah, that's basically how we finance it, along with the Global Screen Fund and the UK tax credit.
Yeah, and RTE, you did a little pre-sale to RTE, and we had a little pre-sale in Belgium as well to a TV.
Yeah, BTV in Belgium and the Irish National Broadcaster RTE kind of helped unlock the Commission the Man for us, because that's a fund that we have to have a commitment from a broadcaster in Ireland in order to be able to access. So that was an important piece of the finance as well.
The Global Screen Fund did rescue us. Like, we had this hole and we just could not fill it, and we literally could not make the film without that money, because we were making it for as little as we possibly could. And then the Global Screen Fund kind of appeared out of nowhere like this.
In 2021, it appeared.
God, yeah.
The UK government gods and the BFI made it possible for this fund to exist. Yeah. Thank you. I wanted to ask the same question to the Lomu team, and obviously we're talking about the documentary. We mentioned the Dog Wolf was involved at early stages, so that was helpful. But how did that initial piece of financing, Emma, maybe I'll direct that to you, come on together? I know obviously our friends in the New Zealand Film Fund, or was it the Film Commission, how did you go about finding those sources of financing? Obviously, that you have a story with a very prominent protagonist. Was that a benefit? Was it a drawback? Was there any challenges in this journey?
Well, I think from my perspective, we've done quite a lot of co-productions before, so that I suppose was the thing that we were bringing to the table. And Victoria and Simon have extensive sports knowledge, so it was actually the perfect union, really. And from a financing perspective, all of the co-productions that we're involved with, we can sort of bring, well, definitely one thing, which is the 40% rebate that we have. And you can access that 40% through two ways. One, which is either through a cultural test or through an official co-production. So by being an official co-production, that's how we managed to get that 40%. And we also managed to get discretionary funding out of the NZFC, we don't really have any sort of state or regional funding because we're too little. So that's kind of where we're at. And the Film Commission wanted to support us because it was about a New Zealand hero. And we also had 2 directors on the project, one of which was from New Zealand. I'll let you talk about Gav. But the New Zealand director was a woman by the name of Vea Mafaleo, who had a background she was Tongan, but born in New Zealand. And it was really important to us to have that Tongan point of view because a lot of the family were involved, and Jonah's mum in particular found it easier communicating in Tongan. So having a director that could sit in the room with her and could really get to the meat and potatoes about the story from her, speaking in her language, and also then when we travelled to Tonga to do that. So the 2 pieces were the 40% and the NZFC. We had a little bit of post-reinvestment, and then I think the rest of it was from the UK, from memory.
So we had a fun journey in the UK. So we'd originally we'd raised 400,000 private equity, actually, which we were bringing to the table for the Lomu documentary, which was sat in a priority position in the waterfall. And we then applied for our Global Screen Fund grant, and we also had the UK Film Tax Credit. But it's been a tricky old tumultuous time out there in our big wide world. And so in our journey, in fact, we've closed the film 2 times because 2 weeks before our first close, we actually had 250k sterling drop out because of other financial complexities going on. So as you can imagine, that's what we label a bad day in the office. So, so there was a lot of fast work going on, but thankfully, again, I think just the team that we'd brought together collectively was incredibly strong. The story and the creative that Gav Fitzgerald and Vea Mafaleo had worked on is just deeply moving, profoundly intelligent, creative, and that's something that everybody has really bought into and wanted to see made. So obviously, naturally, there was a bit of a delay when you lose a segment of finance like that, but oddly enough, you know, that kind of played in our favour in a way because there had been tax credit changes in the UK, which meant that because of our new green light date or proposed green light date, that we would actually qualify for the AVEC film tax credit. So that allowed us to reduce the 250k gap to some degree. We went back out to the market and we raised another 150k private equity to fill some of that gap. And then we were able, with our co-producers in New Zealand, to pull together a post-deal with Images and Sound in New Zealand. And so we were able just to keep shrinking that gap until we finally got there. And thankfully, we're able to close that second time and green light. So we definitely don't pretend that it was a smooth journey, but it was just a really, I think what was just so wonderful is when stuff like that happens, is just if you really are working in a collaborative partnership, then you're all in it together, many heads together, you figure it out, and we did, and we've really have, you know, we've got a successful partnership there, and it shines through in the film. It's just a happy team, 2 sides of the globe, getting something they love made, you know, so.
And also our budget had to be a decent size because there's a lot of sport archive, which through Victoria's experience knows it's very, generally speaking, very expensive. So we really had to make sure we couldn't just reduce the budget to get rid of that hole. We had to sort of stick to where we felt was appropriate, and what we could, the archive was the really, really big cost there. Mm.
I want to come back to the wonderful team and how important that is to have a good team and what your roles are. But before I go there, I wanted to make sure that we covered this official co-production point so people really understand it. Maybe I'll spend 1 minute to describe what makes an official co-production. And then maybe I will ask all of you to just chime in on why it makes sense to produce under the official framework. So to be an official co-production, you basically have to use a treaty framework. In Europe, it is easier because there is one common framework being the European Convention. There's the revised European Convention that some countries are members of, and the original one that other countries are members of. So you have to just make sure that all the parties you work with are members of the same convention that you're planning to use. In other circumstances, particularly working with non-European partners, there isn't this kind of common one framework, but there are individual treaties that you could rely on. The UK has about 14 bilateral treaties. UK and New Zealand have a treaty, UK and Canada have a treaty, and they have each their own rules. And sometimes they cover film, sometimes they cover film and TV. What that means is that on both sides, you have to meet a number of rules for how to structure the production so that it's accepted as official product of multiple territories. 2 territories for UK and New Zealand, 3 territories when you're doing Ireland, UK, and Belgium. So for each territory, your film is qualifying as local, which then gives you access to incentives, to certain funds, distribution and production. It gives you, obviously, the profile of being a national film for multiple territories, which helps in festivals, it helps with promotion. But for each of you, because it is a choice, right? It's a choice to go through that framework. That probably means more legal fees. It probably means elements going left and right in complicated fashion. So why choose to be official co-production? For all of your questions to the whole panel.
Yeah, well, for Irish producers, generally we have to, in order to access Screen Ireland funding, it needs to be an official co-production if it's with a country that there's a treaty with. Obviously, with the US it would be unofficial, but with the UK it would go under the European Convention, and with other territories like Canada we'd use their treaty. So it's part of it is in order to access funding, but separate to that, it does allow then you as co-producer to really get creatively involved properly in the project, because there is a requirement to have certain HODs from your territory or creative talent involved. It's not just a service production. You have like this place at the table creatively. You get, I guess, more rights as well in terms of usually back end too. So it's good, like from a financial and a creative perspective, and it's really good for films generally. And I think collaboratively for different territories to partner and create stories that can be international, because a lot of times when you work with international producers, they just bring a different POV sometimes to the script even, so it can be really invigorating for a project, I think.
I would just say, to add one thing, so on How to Have Sex, for example, we didn't do an official co-production. We teamed up with Heretic in Greece very late, and we were not able to apply for the Greek funds, and we just thought it would be simpler to do a sort of service production and go in that way, or essentially not do an official co-production. But what we really didn't want, because we were shooting the entire thing in Greece, was for them to be like, well, we're just the service producer. So in every other way, like in the contract with them, we treated them like a proper co-production partner, and we gave them the right credits, and they are like genuine partners. We worked incredibly well with them. So I would say, even if you're not doing an official co-production, you don't have to just go, well, it's a service production, you're a service production company, because you're not going to get the best out of people. So you can still kind of follow all of the sort of principles of co-production.
I'm going to jump in here as well and say another advantage of an official co-production is that you have a lot more backing in terms of promotion. So, there's a separate dedicated person just for marketing in Screen Ireland who's always going around and schmoozing with all the different festivals and doing a really good job of pitching projects. And, when you have that backing of not just BFI, also Screen Ireland, the more people that can be out there promoting your project, the more, exposure at the end of the day. And it really, I think, helped us in our festival journey. So I think that's a major benefit.
And it also elevates the project, which is kind of continuing on from what you were saying. I suppose in reality we could have made a Jonah Lomu documentary in New Zealand, but I think it would have felt small. It also came from the UK, and Jonah was an international star. Having Victoria and Simon, who are sports specialists, so the amount creatively what they were bringing to the table was huge, and as well as having access to a whole nother pool of talent on the other side of the globe, which was integral to what we're making here, and then all the financing. So I think on many levels it is quite interesting. I think that you just have to be careful when you're looking at your rebates, because they kind of cancel each other out. So it's like, what money beyond the rebate can you bring to the table? Otherwise, if you're just looking at it from a rebate perspective, it probably will cost you too much, because by the time you've shared the producing fees, the accounting, the legals, that kind of stuff, it doesn't quite make financial sense. So you've got to make sure there's other money coming in.
I think what's coming across strongly is you're looking for basically equitable distribution of responsibilities and benefits, not only in terms of structuring it more easily in the official framework, but also respecting the work of your co-producer, even if it's not in the official framework. Being able to recognize their contribution on the right footing is probably number one, and then structuring it in a way that allows you to tap into multiple incentives beyond just the tax credit. Number two, back in summers.
And that's why having such a strong partner is really important, because if you combine two strong parties together that have kind of their own, sort of circle around them, and you put those two things together, it can be extremely dynamic and really beneficial. And that's certainly been the case for our film.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it does need to make sense as a partner as well. I agree with the point on, what else can you get aside from the rebates, because it can be easy to go to a market and kind of listen to all the different options that are available in different countries, but sometimes the requirement of spend is quite onerous, and you can end up, being really top heavy, and then the film is really a struggle to make. It can become, what they call a Euro pudding or that. So you want to avoid that, and like they should be partners that make sense in every respect, like financially, but also creatively. So I think you really do need to choose carefully, assess what each country can bring, assess what the partner is saying, why they want to be involved. Is it for the reasons that are creatively? Like Bring Them Down was an incredibly long and difficult journey. So we had to really all love it at all times. It was the same with The Apprentice. So it's like you need to have the love for the project, or it'll become really, really difficult to stick with it.
Actually, a great segue into my next question, because we've been emphasizing the benefit of a strong partnership. But once you come together with two really strong partners, or three really strong partners in your case, how do you decide who does what? Like, do you have to have a conversation from the beginning about roles and responsibilities? Is it organic? Do you split certain aspects of post-production interviews in one country? How do you go about having that discussion so that it's transparent and there is no disappointment for a very long production process in some cases?
Yes, you should definitely talk about it up front, so you don't waste your time. That's really, really, really important. And I think the other important thing for co-productions for people who haven't done official ones before is understanding that you have spend, you have finance, and you have creative points. And however you choose to split those between the territories, they all have to be roughly the same percentage. So, for example, if you're doing a narrative drama, and let's say you're shooting in New Zealand and you're posting in the UK, let's say it's a 70-30 split, then New Zealand has to spend 70% of it in its country, has to have the creative points to 70%, and as well as the raising of the finance. So in principle, that's really important. So you have that discussion right up front. Of course, it may evolve as time goes on, but you've got to have quite a clear steer. So as soon as you're doing your finance plan, you're working out that split of finance, spend, and points, because if it doesn't work up front initially, then it's probably not going to work in the long run.
Yeah, and also you should probably have it outlined in your long-form co-production agreement in terms of the split of responsibilities. Like, so for Bring Them Down, we would have overseen the shoot, and obviously it was jointly creatively involved. But if it involved like a decision on something to do with budget within Ireland on the ground shooting, like the tie-break decision would rest with us, and then vice versa with post and for the UK and Belgium.
I think that long form flushes most of it out, really, if you do it properly.
Yeah, but there's a lot of kind of back and forth in terms of discovering what the right combination is, and I think it's really important to manage expectations with if you have a director in place, that they need to be flexible, and open to talking to different DOPs or production designers from other countries. Now, in the end, we did partner with UK-based DOP and production designer. We did a small bit of filming in the UK, mainly filming in Ireland, but you just have to be flexible, open-minded, and just want to get the film made. And sometimes it means opening your mind to crew that work in other countries. They're from other countries, or actors cast from there as well.
But I think it's such a positive thing doing these co-productions. There are so many productions that I honestly don't think would see the light of day unless there was an international collaborative approach to doing it. So some stories just require that. It's genuinely been, kind of like a really eye-opening experience. And I think given the world that we're all working in at the moment, then, you know, it's a really great time to be pursuing those partnerships and international relationships to see what you can bring together so that we can, by volume, get more of our films and stories out there. And that collective global voice is really important at this time. So, yeah.
Absolutely. And films that tell global stories as well, that can be seen in multiple territories, which I'm sure is what we're all striving for with the projects we create. I wanted to ask maybe two individual questions to the projects about the specific dynamics at play, and I will perhaps start with bring them down. Obviously, you were working on this with Chris Andrews, who is a phenomenal human being, one of the most humble human beings I've met, an incredible director. This was his feature-length debut. And he is working with an incredible cast as well that's quite high profile. What was it like, this journey of working with him on his debut feature on a large scale? How did you best support him? What is your advice for other producers that might be working with debut directors on a co-production, which is even more complex than just a simple... There is also such a thing as simple debut feature, but it's a double complication.
I mean, I think Chris is really a dream to work with. And like you say, like he is really open to things. Like he doesn't throw his toys out of the pram and go, why don't I have, you know,
yeah.
a
He was incredibly
trailer?
trusting.
Yeah. Really trusting and really kind of, and you know, he's a grown up. He's 50. He's had a life before. You know, he's worked on lots and lots of films and TV as in the camera department. He's dreamed of this his entire life. Like, you know, so he's really happy and grateful and open and responsive to kind of what the opportunities are. So I think we were very fortunate in that, and that kind of spirit, because it was a hard shoot. You know, we had stunts and animals every day. We were in Ireland in winter, but the crew loved it. Like they really had a good time, and that came from Chris. It came from this kind of spirit he had that, you know, we're all here doing something that we've dreamed of our whole life.
And it took so long for the film to actually go into production because we had a few false starts for different reasons, through financing changes, an actor issue at one point. So, you know, he had to really be patient. I think by the time it was ready to shoot, like he was more than ready and willing to take on whatever was going to be thrown at him. And even in post, it was quite protracted as well. So he's been super patient, but he is just really open, and yeah, the spirit on the set was really positive, even though it's a very dark film. It was like probably the most positive set you could have had, like, yeah.
And the cast, I mean, we were really fortunate. I think we got this incredible cast. The script was brilliant, but also I really do think he had very little dialogue in the script, and I think cast love scripts with no dialogue because they're like, I can just act it all with my body, you know. So we had this really amazing cast, and you know, on a very, very low budget film, and that is quite a lot to manage. And one of them, you know, American speaking Irish.
Yeah, I was going to say that
learning phonetic Irish. Yeah. I mean, that
was one of the biggest challenges for a director, to direct another language. You know, that he obviously doesn't speak. He knows what the lines mean, but you know the phonetics. So we did have a dialect coach on the set just to advise on the day. But Christopher Abbott is an American actor, and he had to learn how to speak the Irish language phonetically. And he did an amazing job. He actually sounds like he's from Galway. Like genuinely, like Irish people are just blown away with how good it is. And that's for, as Irish producers, seeing so many badly done Irish accents over the years, you know, that was one of our biggest nerves when we saw that he was going to be cast. But he was amazing.
I was actually sitting in LFF in the premiere next to an Irish man who got up to ask the question, how did you get Christopher Abbott to speak with no accent whatsoever? It was remarkable. It's a remarkable film, really, about masculinity and violence, and actually about the futility of violence at the same time. Really well put together, and I highly recommend that you get a chance to see it. So before we go to Lomu, one quick question. Where can people see it? When is it coming next?
It's on Mubi. Everyone should have Mubi. So
great plug. And it's also distributed. It was distributed in France very recently. I think it's Australia,
it just
New
came out in
Zealand
France,
soon.
Australia, very soon, and then you know a bunch of other international territories coming up over the next few months.
So yes, go to your local theater and see it. If not, it will be on Mubi as well. Great part. So coming back to Lomu, also very interesting situation with two co-directors. And actually, it's partially, I think, to tell the story in the most authentic way, but also two teams working potentially in different time zones. We have obviously the Irish-born UK residing Gavin Fitzgerald, the very experienced director, and we also mentioned Vea Mafileo, who is Tongan from the same islands as Jonah. How did this combination come together? How did they gel together? How did they decide how to manage this, working, what I imagine is across different time zones and territories with different teams?
Well, we're definitely working 24/7.
Yeah.
That's the beauty of literally being the furthest place away from the UK. And I mean, Gav really took the lead. He was at the table first, and then Vea came in, and they really knew what their roles were. Gav had been very experienced at doing other international documentaries, and Vea had her own experience as well, but it wasn't as high profile as what Gav was. And Vea really knew that she was able to bring the Tongan aspect that was really important to the story, and really felt the weight of that as well. So she surrounded herself with the cultural experts that she needed, and to feel safe and culturally safe and supported throughout that process. So that was really good. And Gav came out twice to New Zealand, and worked with us over there on the shoot. And I'll let Victoria talk to you about the edit.
Yeah, no, so I mean, basically, it's actually played really well doing a co-production with New Zealand, because obviously, you know, if we're doing things in the UK, we can set things off and communicate that to our team at the end of the day, just as they're beginning theirs, and they run with it for that. So we've kind of got more time out of our project in all elements of it, because we are working that 24-hour cycle. So no, that's been really good, and it also means that, you know, for stuff being fed into the edit, Gav gets a chance to communicate things back to Vea at the end of the day and the end of the week, every week in the edit. So they've got a really great communication cycle going on there with the creative. But yeah, for us, it's just been, you know, having Gav at the table was something that came on early on via Dogwoof was the introduction. He's done his Conor McGregor Notorious, and as I was with Liam Gallagher, so a couple of those profile docs, which is what helped us secure the private finance, among other things, from the UK, so it was important. But there is no way in the world that we couldn't have a Tongan director on board in this film. The authenticity and integrity of this storytelling is of fundamental importance. And yeah, so that was the motivation behind the New Zealand co-production in the first place. You know, it's like we had to have New Zealand on board and part of this journey to tell the story authentically.
And I think it's about generosity, having two directors. So they both had to be generous to each other, and I think they really understood each other's strengths and what they were bringing, and they acknowledged that, they respected that, and then they were able to sort of work within their own sandpits, but at the same time collaborate and communicate the whole time. So I think it's actually been quite a lovely marriage between the two of them, creatively and working on the film.
Right. Speaking about lovely marriages, this will be my last question, and I will actually address it to our wonderful international co-producers, so Julianne, Ruth, and to Emma. You are in the UK Pavilion, but be honest, what was it like to work with the UK, and would you do it again?
I love working with the UK, but I'm a first-generation New Zealander, so both my parents come from the UK, so we're very tied to the motherland, I suppose, in a lot of ways. And so therefore there's a lot of similarities, and one of the producers I work with is also from the UK, so she understood the UK tax credit system and all of that kind of thing really, really well. But I loved it, and I thought the thing that I really loved is that when we had our stumble with our finance plan, you guys raised your tax credit, and I was like, thank God for that. That was a real blessing.
It was just for this project, by the way.
and then the global screen thing was available as well, and then that was a bit of a game changer as well. And even if it wasn't huge money, it was enough money, because often the last bit you need isn't massive, but it's the hardest part to fill. So having that money was really important. I have intentions of doing lots more co-productions with the UK. I really, really enjoyed it.
Keep them coming. We'd love to see them.
Thank you.
Julia?
Yeah, it was a really positive experience working with the UK. I think Ireland and the UK are a very natural fit because we speak the same language. It's very easy to communicate. Even in terms of the crews on set, we structurally have the same, setup in terms of ADs. That's not the case in a lot of other countries around Europe. It might be slightly different, and then you have to learn those structures as well, whereas this was a really natural fit. You can easily, what happens in the UK in terms of filming pretty much happens in Ireland, so it was quite easy. And it's really empowering to do an international co-production to get your project off the ground, because you're not relying on one or two or three gatekeepers like to finance you. You know, it's about finding like-minded people, getting little pieces of finance, making the whole thing happen. And once you get the first piece in, it tends to snowball. People want to be part of something that already somebody else gave the thumbs up to, you know. So that's kind of the exciting part of co-producing as well.
And as well, just kind of, it's so hard, like producing anything, but it's hard doing a co-production. And when you've gone through that with someone that you have come out the other side with a really positive experience with, like, it's just, you want to work with them again, basically. So we're going to work with Ivana on her next film, hopefully. And then likewise, we've just decided that we're definitely going to work, she's going to work on our next Irish film too. So it's like long-running partnerships is like the key to it, I think, you know. So then the next time, hopefully, it'll be a little bit easier. We certainly know how each other work, which is, you know, a great starting point.
Yeah, and I think it really does enable you to kind of just do more projects. You know, you come here and you meet a few people who you really like and have co-produced with, and suddenly you're like, oh, there's like another 3 things that kind of are possible and interesting, and you can kind of, you know, have a really sort of creative conversation with. So I think it's really valuable.
Another thing to mention is like co-producing really lightens the load. You know, you're not across everything from the very start to the very end. You're able to pass the baton over to your teammate, and they can, you know, run with certain elements. So it does also free you up to kind of focus on other projects and developing other projects. It's not such a long time drain across one project as a solo producer.
Love the idea of this sort of 24-hour working day, though. my business partner would be like, that sounds like hell. And I'd be like, you have 24 hours in which you can constantly be working. This is amazing.
But it is passing the baton.
Yes.
Not just one, well, not one individual.
Oh, I know, but you're one brain.
I think one brain and long-lasting partnership is what I want to leave this conversation with. We're going to open up for questions now. So if you have a question, raise your hand and we will get a mic over to you. Maybe let's start with the last row first and then we go up.
Hello, this is for the Bring Them Down producers. I just was wondering, you mentioned that it was set in the Peak District originally, and Chris isn't Irish, but also Christopher Abbott isn't Irish. So I wondered if you could talk a little bit about the red tape, if any, in addition to having to bring on the language consultant. Like, were there any difficult conversations you had to have around that, or is it a little bit more straightforward in Ireland?
Well, we did a lot of work before we decided to bring it to Screen Ireland for financing. So, you know, we spent a lot of time with Chris and Ivana and Jacob on the script and talking about, okay, yes, this is a story that's set in England but could easily be in Ireland. It's about rural isolation, toxic masculinity, men that don't talk, and then eventually that kind of repressed, not communicating, boils over into something huge. There was so many stories in recent years of Irish farmers having like revenge between their neighbours that like escalated to death in some cases. So, you know, it felt like something that you could definitely relate to on an Irish level. In terms of Chris, he was just so open to working with the dialect coach, who's also a writer as well himself, on the dialogue, the authenticity of what would be said in that situation. And then Pader actually did obviously the Irish translation of the scenes. So we were really happy with the script when we submitted it to Screen Ireland, and we had a huge rationale as to why this, you know, was really important. I should also mention, you know, we applied for co-production funding from Screen Ireland, not majority Irish funding, because you can't apply for the majority fund if you don't have an Irish director. So there was a ceiling to what we could apply for. But, you know, the fact that this was Ireland as Ireland on screen, and, you know, it was a very Irish story, was really engaging anyway. So that kind of reduced any red tape that might have been in place. But then when Chris Abbott came on, you know, he was just so willing to do the work. We were nervous at first, could he get there? But the dialect coach did a Zoom with him early on and said, look, I feel like, you know, he's not there yet, but he can get there. So we just trusted his instincts. And yeah, like, we really don't feel like, as an Irish person could watch that film, and I don't think they would have, if you said it was an Irish director, an Irish writer, like, you'd completely be credible, yeah.
And can I just say, from the point of view of UK Public Fund, Screen Ireland and the New Zealand Film Commission, incredibly approachable. We copy all of their schemes, the way they do events. There's always a dialogue that can be had. They're very, very welcoming and happy to give advice.
Screen Ireland are amazing. I see one of the project managers at the back there.
Oopsie, we might have
But no, but they genuinely are. Like we will be their biggest advocate wherever we can because they've always backed co-production. We're a small island. We've always had to co-produce. I mean, the question of like, have you ever co-produced never really comes up in Ireland because we can never finance a film alone. So we co-produce everything.
Yeah, because like in Ireland, there's only 5 million people, so like any sort of broadcaster license that's given isn't enough to finance anything. So we have to finance through international co-production. And, you know, even if we're working with an Irish director, we only regard, you know, what we can bring from Ireland as the first step, and then we'll look outside of that to build upon that.
Yeah, and but just even in terms of what they will look at, you know, they're very forward-thinking fund. So, you know, and it's a great place to co-produce with. I'm not going to just do a big sales pitch, but genuinely it is.
I would. We love Screen Island. And if you haven't met Chris Payne from New Zealand Film Commission, please do, because he's incredible. Next question. I think we had one here, and then we'll go to you. Yeah.
Hi, thank you so much for the informative talk. My name's Tahi. I'm a producer in the UK, and I was very lucky to get development funding from Screen Ireland with an amazing Irish co-producer. And so I've never actually heard about the commission, the MAN Fund. And I know this is a Google search away, so I apologise. But do they also fund documentary features? It's just my first one, so.
Yeah, they do.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously their remit is predominantly Irish heritage and culture. So I mean, us being successful for Bring Them Down in obtaining the backing of Commission the Man very much was dependent upon us imagining the story and, you know, making sure the script developed in a way where it was definitely, you know, rich in Irish elements. So it mightn't suit every story, but it definitely worked in our case.
Well, thank you. And then just a quick question for Victoria and Emma. When approaching, say, Dogworth on a documentary feature, I'm sure you can approach them at, you know, multiple stages, but what would you say is a strong stage to approach, you know, a sales company like that, and what would you need at that point?
So when we go and speak to Dogworth or any sales agent that we're approaching for a film, it's always once we've spent a bit of time really nailing the creative treatment and making sure that we have our directors attached, and so we know who that key talent is, because really it's kind of the producer package around it so that there's confidence from the sales agent that they know the film can be delivered, but it really does ride on the directors and the strength of that creative treatment. So that is how we went to Dogworth on Lomu. You know, we put that treatment in front of them. Off the back of that, we got some development finance from Dogworth, which was matched by the New Zealand Film Commission. So that was when I first managed to go out to New Zealand, and I physically met Emma and Victoria, our co-producers, and we made the teaser together, because it was that teaser that then enabled us to pull all the other finance together, because people could visually see what we were gunning for and what the standard was going to be.
Thank you. We had a question over there. Sorry, make the mic travel.
Thanks. I think it was Julianne who said something about one of the advantages of having a co-production team is you have the chance to pass the baton and people can pick up some slack. Did you ever get a sense of a flip side of that? Was there ever a sense of too many cooks? And if those issues ever come up, how would you nip them in the bud? Also, one more thing, Ivana, the thing you said about it'd be a great idea to be able to work 24 hours a day. That's kind of the subject of the movie I'm developing. So if I ever get a chance to pitch you, let's talk.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to put in place measures to make sure that everything is agreed in advance as much as possible. And, you know, usually you put that in writing in, first of all, a co-production deal memo, and then you flesh it out even further in a co-production deal agreement, which deals with it in even more detail. And once there's a guidebook to just keep looking back to, it tends to really, really help when it comes to kind of final decisions. But another huge part of it is really be careful who you co-produce with, because they should be people that come highly recommended, people that you get a good vibe with and that you feel you're going to work well with, because you're really in it for the long haul. Exactly, like really just discuss it and agree it in advance, like what elements everybody's doing. And of course, it's okay to challenge each other, but they're always, you have to have the security of knowing that, you each have your own space that you're going to be across, and everyone knows their position.
think we might have time for one last question. Is there any other audience question? Yes, you can come to you.
Hi, so you guys have spoken about documentaries and about features, but I'm curious about co-productions when it comes to series and how that differs in the partnerships, whether that's a limited series or a longer running series.
I can answer that.
Yeah, we've both.
We just did our first international co-production TV series called Louise Lives Large. That was a scripted drama for young people that was released in 2024. So prior to that, we had done a lot of television series in the same space, but just for the Irish broadcaster, RTE. And we were like, these budgets are too low. We're so experienced in international co-production for feature film. Why aren't we doing this for TV? And yeah, we did it. So we developed the scripts in-house in Tailored Films, and we were the majority financier in Ireland, and then we brought on minority in Belgium and Canada. So for us, in the end, the model pretty much works the same. I will say that TV is a totally different market, so you're likely to encounter or need different producers. But a lot of the functionality of how you do it is the same.
Maybe I can add to that from my TV background. There's some differences. There isn't the same established co-production treaty framework for TV. There are conversations ongoing in Europe to model a framework based on the film convention. But at the moment, if you're thinking about the official structure, you're relying on the existence of treaties that have TV. And if you're thinking about tax relief, you're looking at a different scheme, and the budget level of your product matters per episode. But that's the kind of the legal framework mechanic and how you access support and tax relief. When it comes to the partnership, it's very much the same. You're looking for a partner with shared values, shared vision of the project that can bring, in this case, local funding, because a lot of national and regional funds in the UK support TV. We would have funding from Screen Scotland, Northern Ireland Screen. There's different schemes that support TV productions as well in different genres. You'll also be looking at broadcasters, because that will be your biggest source of financing. As a scheme, UK Global Screen Fund does have a TV pathway for co-productions, where specifically for factual and for animation. Unfortunately, our budget is not big enough to accommodate TV drama, but then we look at certain elements which are the equivalent of the film financing model. We look for broadcasters to be attached when the project comes together before it comes for funding. And we will be looking again at the international audience potential, but that potential will be justified not so much by a sales agent, but by pre-sales and broadcasters attachment, and by a sense that the project can actually travel internationally. But otherwise, the mechanics are similar, and there's a lot of companies that work across both film and TV, but it does take a different set of connections with broadcasters that can be quite different, and a different funding ecosystem that is not entirely the same body being responsible for film and TV funding. So more homework in a way.
In New Zealand, the rebate is 40%, whether regarding if it's film or TV. Just thought I should put that out there.
Thank you for that. I think that might be all we have time for today, but thank you very much for being a very engaged audience. Thank you for our panelists for incredibly rich conversation. Very diverse, but very similar, and I think very much a testament to the value and benefits of co-production. So a big round of applause for them.